430 on Brent, and WTI trading again below $90 a barrel. So we saw that big bounce over the last few weeks on the back of OPEC's plans to cut supplies. And then since they've actually made the announcement, of course, oil prices have traded a little bit off this week, a downward trend, dropping with the global growth forecast from the IMF in the last 24 hours. But let's go to Turkey and try to figure out what all of this means for the great love affair between Mr. Erdogan and Mr. Putin. Mehmet Ogutku, Group CEO, Global Resource Partnership, and Chairman of the London Energy Club. Let's start with you, Mehmet, and you get your sense of where this puts Turkey and the relationship with Russia.
Well, Turkey, of course, is not happy about the fact that the oil prices was going up after the OPEC Plus decision to cut output by 2 million barrels a day. And now also there was a threat from Russia that if the oil price cap would go ahead as planned by G7, it's going to cut output by another million barrels a day. And so everybody was expecting the oil prices to go up. As a result, this is not a good news for a country like Turkey, heavily dependent on import. Almost 93% of Turkish oil comes from different sources. And Turkish energy import bill will be around $100 billion by the end of this year. This is a very serious setback for a country like Turkey, which is suffering an economic crisis like many other countries in the region. It's not only because of the high energy prices, but also there's a serious mismanagement due to lower interest rates and high inflation and lack of transparency and governance issues. And therefore, what's happening in the market is very important to follow from the Turkish point of view. But Turkish special relationship with Russia, no matter what happens with the West, is very important. And Erdogan, you mentioned about the love affair with Putin. He met actually 4 times with Putin almost in a month time. And he's going to meet this week again in Astana with Putin. So they have a certain chemistry. It's not only between the countries, but personal chemistry between the leaders, which is driving Turkish-Russian relations. And it's also related somehow Turkey's growing discontent with the West in foreign policy, economic relations, and other areas. And Turkey is preparing for the presidential election in June 2023, and campaign has already started. In order to win a new term, Erdogan, for him, it's a survival, that and life matter, survival matter. He's working very hard. And he is also trying to play a breach between Ukraine and Russia in this long-standing conflict, which I don't think will be concluded anytime soon. Therefore, Turkey positioning itself as a party which can talk to Kiev, Moscow, Washington, Beijing, Brussels, Tehran, so that this conflict will be somehow resolved, because not only for commercial interests, but for strategic reasons, I think Ukraine must remain an independent sovereign nation without losing its ports in the Black Sea. So there are so many elements in Turkish policy. Yeah. But one additional point is that Turkey is also recalibrating its foreign and security policy vis-a-vis Israel, Egypt, as we discussed before, and some tensions with Greece and Cyprus continue. But with the rest of the East Med nations and Gulf nations, Saudi Arabia included, Turkey is changing its traditionally assertive policy over the past 10 years. Now, understanding that it needs to engage these countries in order to break its isolation, self-imposed isolation in a way.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in those comments. In some ways, they reflect the mercurial nature that is Erdogan and his policy at the moment. Let's go to Daniel Richards, a Middle East North Africa economist with Emirates MBD here in the United Arab Emirates. Daniel, it's clear that the decision by OPEC Plus last week, amongst the many reasons, stability in the oil markets and all other reasons given, there was an outlook for weakening demand, and it was somewhat of a preemptive strike. Your thoughts a week or so later, is this strategy a success? Was it the right choice to make?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we are facing the global slowdown, and that will have issues or impact on demand by necessity. And it was underlined by the latest WEO forecast last night. All the same, whether it's the right strategy still remains to be seen. Of course, that 2 million wasn't effective. 2 million, given many, I think only 7 were hitting their targets in any case of the 19 members of the OPEC Plus agreement. But all the same, given how it has riled to an extent the United States, and what impact will it have over the coming weeks in terms of prices? In any case, is it worth it? It remains to be seen. Obviously, pretty harsh words from President Biden yesterday, but potentially more bark than bite in this instance. I think it remains to be seen what he can actually do. He's going to wait until after midterms. Will he have the authority? Will the Democrats have the authority to push through any particular measures then? Does seem to have riled bipartisan anger, but all the same, I struggle to see what exactly the US could do other than releasing more SPRs. So whether it's the right strategy, I think time will tell, but it potentially alienated more people than it needed to in the near term, at least, I'd say.
Let's welcome Matt Stanley. Matt, good to have you back at the table. Of course, Matt is now no longer in what he was, and is now the partnership lead Middle East for Kepler, and we had his participation last week at the Energy Markets Forum. Matt, your thoughts? We've had this downward draft in the oil markets over the last few weeks, maybe even longer if you take, from the peak after the invasion of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Prices ratcheted up to 130 on the concern of the security of supply, and over the intervening months, we've sort of progressively, that downward draft has continued, and even with this big step by OPEC Plus, we seem to be, that downward draft has returned. Your thoughts on whether indeed OPEC Plus can manage to hold this oil price above $90 based on the decision they made last week?
Yeah, morning, Sean. Morning, everyone. Sorry, I was a bit late. It's a bit like Arsenal. I'm worried that I'm top of the league at the moment. I'm worried I'm going to choke at any point, but that's okay.
Yeah. Good reason to be worried.
Yeah, we won't get involved in Man United, Sean, so it's fine. No, look, I think that they firmly set a floor under prices. 85 to 100 is the range. It's a little difficult for the market to kind of come to terms with, because, as I said last week in Fujairah, which was excellent, it was great to see everyone. It's a little difficult for the market to comprehend in that, what is the objective of the OPEC group? Is it to balance market dynamics regarding the supply and demand, or is it to, protect prices at a level that is acceptable for fiscal budgets within the GCC core? I'm not so sure how the market kind of reacts to that. Look, there are bigger factors at play as well. I mean, as much as OPEC are move the needle when it comes to oil prices, the fundamentals remain in that Q4 is still ambiguous in what's going to happen. I know your opinion about, you go to turn the boiler on if you're in Central Europe in, say, 2 months' time and there's not enough gas, or if the gas that is there is going to be that much more expensive, what happens to demand? Talking to a Danish friend last week in Fujairah, and he's like, sales of slippers have gone through the roof in Denmark. Is that demand destruction? What happens to flat price? We've seen the French do what the French do best, which is strike. And 4% of European refining output has taken a hit this week. Total and Exxon, there's about 600,000 barrels a day of refining output that is offline. That's had a massive effect on diesel, and diesel in Europe doesn't need that much more of a direction to rally, because of the issues that's going to happen with Russia and Russia's supply into the bloc in a few months' time. The decision OPEC made was one that they had to make. There wasn't, they backed themselves into a corner, and unless that they supported what has been an excellent agenda that they've set themselves since April 2020, they had no ulterior, they had no other option as to maintain course. 85 to 100, I think, is the range until we really see what happens with Q4 demand in Europe.
Mehmet, just coming back to the situation with the position of Turkey in NATO and Turkey engaging with Putin. Where do you, I mean, obviously Erdogan signed off on Sweden and Finland becoming members of NATO only a few weeks ago, and now he's playing the other side. How should his NATO allies consider? And when we think of Erdogan and we think of Putin, we think of the individuals. With Erdogan, should we also think of the country? Is Turkey with Erdogan in all of this, or is it the man in the way that Putin is? Putin Russia, or is it just Putin? How should the West think of Erdogan in this moment?
Well, right now, of course, Erdogan is the man running the country through his very strong executive, legislative, and judicial powers. All of them almost merge into one. Therefore, whatever Erdogan does, of course, represents Turkey. However, of course, persons are here for a limited period of time, and you might have a different Turkey, perhaps, after June 2023, if he loses election and this coalition of 6 parties comes to power through a restoration, and it might be a totally different. Therefore, when treating Turkey, I don't think that West should only judge on the basis of what Erdogan does. Of course, you have a counterpart there, but Turkey as a country is a very important country to reckon with in many respects. So if you deal with Turkey in such a way that it will alienate and push Turkey further to Russia, China, and Iran camp, and then this might be the loss of Turkey even after June 2023. Therefore, one has to treat it very carefully. And also, we need a leader like Erdogan in this current juncture, able to talk to all the different capitals, bridging the gaps, because he's doing it quite successfully in many ways. And he's now.
Yeah, but he has looked within the context of the Putin relationship very much like the junior partner. You know, he's having to sort of, in a way, it looks externally like a weak posture, in the same way that Putin looks weak when he has to go and visit with Mr. Xi. The dominoes fall. It doesn't seem, at least, that it's an equal relationship. Your thoughts on that? Is that a misreading of the equation?
I think you are partly right in that. It's an asymmetrical relationship Turkey has with Moscow, because Moscow has the upper hands in many regards, in terms of tourism, defense cooperation, contracting toward their energy. You know, we depend 98% in natural gas import, not only on Russia, but Russia is a big picture of that. You are also right in terms of relationship between Putin and Xi Jinping, big brother, younger brother. And but I think Erdogan has to treat it very carefully, because there are so much involved in it, in terms of nuclear power plants that Russia is building in Turkey, and also Turk Stream, 2 of the pipelines coming under the Black Sea, providing Turkey some sort of autonomy in natural gas, although dependency is there. But I think if Turkey is pushed away from the West and cannot get what it wants, economic terms, security, especially with regard to PYG in Syria, Turkey is hugely disappointed by the US supporting them, and EU is not very warm to the modernization of customs union, then the immigration problem, Turkey is not getting much support, then this country is looking for different directions, and Russia is one of them.
I think ultimately the challenge there, Mehmet, is what kind of country is Turkey? I mean, obviously you started out by saying he has consolidated all of these powers into what increasingly looks like an authoritarian dictatorship. And so that's not really conducive in this time of either with us or against us. Are you a Democrat to be a member of the European Union? I mean, it is a big question, and it's a chicken and an egg. If you don't give them the love, you don't get them. I don't know. It's probably not for this conversation. Daniel,
well, let me add here. If you look at Europe as well and around the world, you see the rise of authoritarian regimes. I mean, it's not Turkey alone.
No.
And therefore, this is a global phenomenon. But I think if you bring Turkey closer to the West through economic, political, security engagement in real terms, not paying lip service, I think Turkey will side with the West. There's no doubt about it.
I think that's right, and it's my opinion, and not that we're here to express my opinion too much, but ultimately, I think Europe really missed the opportunity to embrace Turkey 20 years ago, and they missed the opportunity to embrace Ukraine 10 years ago, and that's part of the problem where we are right now. Daniel, not to get too sidetracked, but I've been saying on this podcast for some time that if we want to see where OPEC is going to defend an oil price, you have to look at the Gulf states' fiscal position. And it seems to me that Saudi Arabia cannot see their dreams realized with NEOM and other massive projects without oil prices sticking as close to $100 as possible for as long as possible. I just wanted to get your view on how important the fiscal health of the region and the oil price, and how big they're willing to defend that, or how much they have to defend a higher oil price, because what we're seeing is a little bit unprecedented. We've never seen OPEC plus, Gulf OPEC defend such a high oil price before.
Yeah, it does seem pretty high, but defending at these levels. I mean, I guess in part they're making up for the lost years effectively post 2014 when they really struggled to run those balanced budgets. I think for most, or a lot of the action this year has been shoring that up. We haven't seen massive outlays and expenditure, especially in terms of short-term spending, which you might have expected in the past of oil prices at this kind of level. It's all been about running balanced books, paying off a balance sheet, and doing long-term investing through the sovereign wealth funds rather than through the budgets. And yeah, in that case for Saudi Arabia especially, they're going to need massive amounts of funds for these huge projects they have. Seems every day there's a new kind of breathtaking new announcement, not least the Winter Games, which are scheduled to be held in NEOM, which isn't even constructed yet, and it's going to need massive infrastructure around all sorts, hotels for skis.
Never mind snow.
Yeah, exactly. Before you even get to the logistical or the technical challenge of doing snow. So if these kind of projects come in thick and fast, they're going to need huge funding. And yeah, I think essentially that is one of the drivers behind their aim at keeping that oil price higher than perhaps they would have been looking for in the past.
Matt, not that we can speculate too greatly, but ultimately the US have sort of indicated a willingness to react to the OPEC plus decision. Obviously unpleased about it, but what is in the toolbox there other than maybe some more SPR? I mean, putting aside the dramatic, things like the Fifth Fleet leaving the Persian Gulf or anything like that, but just sort of SPR, more releases. What is in the OPEC, or what is in the US arsenal to, in a sense, on an energy side, react to this decision?
Yeah, sorry. The irony about what tools are involved in US policy at the moment isn't lost on me. What Grandpa Joe has left in his box, I'm not so sure. Look,
he's been quite effective in releasing the SPR. I mean, it's been a significant amount of oil.
Yeah, I mean, it's a drop in the ocean.
I know, but it's come to the market. It's drop in the ocean, but a drop enough maybe to keep the lid on things.
Yeah, but it depends. It depends how you look at it. If you're a VTOL or a Trafi, the glass is always half empty, and an SPR release means that they will need to replenish those stocks at some stage. I would argue that a trader can interpret an SPR release as, the world hasn't got enough oil, and it's a signal for the market to rally. I think it's a policy that is flawed. I think Biden's energy policy is flawed. I've made that point clear. I think I told Joe, he forgot though, then I told him again, he forgot again. But he probably doesn't remember. But it's look, where is US oil? Where is it been for the last 18 months? I mean, I remember talking to the guy, talking to Dan and talking to Ed at Emirates MBD. Everyone assumed that US oil would make a comeback this year, and it would get back up to the 13 million barrels a day. US oil policy is one of repaying the shareholders for what was a torrid time in early first half of 2020. That's not coming back anytime soon. I the OPEC decision was a hit to Joe and was a hit to the US. And when he's not looking at his own internal streams in order to produce more oil, he's making a trip over to the Saudi and speaking to MBS about, can we have some more oil, please? And of course, that was a big slap in the face for him last week. Look, fundamentally, who's going to put their hands in their pockets and invest in fossil fuels? Arguably, it's the UAE. His Excellency Al Mazrui has made it clear ADNOC want to produce 5 million barrels a day by 2030. He's brought that further in by 5 years to 2025. We're willing to put our hands in our pockets and know that the world needs fossil fuels. I
so ultimately, there's no tools in the U.S. toolbox to sort of counter this move. The tool up till now has been released from SPR. I suppose the other tool, of course, if the Fed keeps raising rates, the economy is going to collapse anyway, and there will go demand. So not that that's the tool you want to use, but for that purpose. But it happens to be in a parallel corridor. Let's get the survey result, because I want to talk to Mehmet about what's going on in China. Will OPEC supply cut deliver $90 floor in oil price through Q4? That's a Brent oil price. Will OPEC plus supply will the supply cut deliver a $90 floor on Brent crude through Q4? Yes or no? Yes or no? Will we break back down through $90 again, like we did just a week or two ago? This market seems to be a bit like a rock and water. It just wants to go down. Will it put a floor? No, yes. Mehmet, of course, this week is a big week in China. We have the Communist Party coming up for their every 5-year meeting. We're expecting President Xi to be coronated on a third term, maybe for life. Your thoughts on the importance of this meeting and what we can expect on the other side of it?
Well, I mean, China, we only talk about the lockdowns in major cities and the zero COVID policy, how its demand will affect our economies and oil prices. But more importantly, starting from 16 October for a week, we are going to have the Chinese Communist Party Congress. This happens only once in every 5 years. This is a very critical one. I don't think that there will be any contestation of Xi Jinping's position, because he has 3 positions, as you know. He is the Secretary General of Chinese Communist Party. He is the President, head of state, and he's also, more important, the chairman of the Central Committee, Central Military Committee. And therefore, like Erdogan in a way, he combines all the key positions to himself. And now 2003 delegates are coming together, and they will be selecting Central Committee, 200 members, then 25 persons for the party Politburo, and among them, 7 standing committee members. This is the elite of the elite. And so you might have heard that there were some fake news that after his return from Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Uzbekistan, he was detained and put into house arrest. And so this was in preparation perhaps for this critical meeting coming up. So he is consolidating his power. As you said, he will be staying perhaps for life in this position because he removed the limits in the constitution. And also his policy, this is his signature, Belt and Road Initiative, has been incorporated into Chinese constitution. And also his goal to take over Taiwan by 2049, that's the official goal in a way. And so we still have a long way to go. And he's still there, and he has confrontational policy vis-a-vis United States, European Union. And he sees Russia, as you said before, in relation to Turkey, as a younger brother in a way, because if you look at the trade relations with Russia, only $150 billion, whereas Chinese trade, overall trade with the world is about $3.3 trillion. So it's very important to engage globally rather than piggyback what Putin is trying to do in Ukraine. Therefore,
what about the internal dynamic in the context of China's zero COVID policy and some of their other problems, demographics, shortage of water? I mean, they have a list of challenges, but getting beyond this Congress party, can we expect Xi to step away from the COVID zero policy?
Well, I think there is an expectation that he might perhaps announce measures at the party Congress to ease these restrictions, because it's disrupting not only Chinese economy, but China's international engagement as well. Because, I used to work as a diplomat in China back in late 1980s and 1990s. And now I cannot go on business to China because 21 days of quarantine requirement. And the economy is not doing well as a reflection of perhaps global downward trends. But Xi Jinping is not doing well. Growth rate is among the lowest in Chinese recent history.
Just speak to the cultural part of that, because the only argument I hear against the lifting of zero COVID is he would lose face, that it would be culturally difficult, not economically, not politically, I suppose, and losing face are part of the same equation. But from a cultural point of view, if he was to step away from it, would it be difficult posture for his status?
Well, I think you have to be realistic. It's a 1.4 billion country. If COVID spreads to other cities as well, it will be a huge blow to his prestige. So it's better to contain it that way. But it's also affecting China's economic performance. And of course, as you said, making him quite unpopular among the people who are locked at home and not going anywhere and doing anything. Then one of the successes of his regime was to increase the economic welfare of the people. Now it's not doing well in this regard. Unemployment is increasing, inflation is increasing, and people are not able to travel freely as they wish, not abroad, even within the provinces and within the cities. So it's a very difficult position. He has to find a solution to that. Probably we will see from 16 October, he will be announcing a series of decisions. He will not lift the zero COVID policy, but he will try to ease it so that there will not be so much reaction against him among the people. And energy crisis, of course, is one of them. China is also suffering. And the coal and then climate change summit is coming in Sharm el-Sheikh. He has to make some statements.
Absolutely, that is definitely a big one. He didn't come to, of course, COP26 in Glasgow. Daniel, I just wanted to close out with your thoughts on the IMF sort of forecast yesterday. Again, downgrading global growth for 2022, and a big part of that is China, and then the outlook again for 23 is been revised down. And we had our China commentator on yesterday saying, don't expect much from China next year. Your thoughts on this constant revision downward? We'll expect more of them, I suppose.
Yeah, I would suspect so, unfortunately. I mean, no big surprise. We had all the comments from the officials of both the Bretton Woods institutions in the run-up to this, and you only have to look around at the global data points for monetary tightening, the composite PMIs turned negative the last couple of months. We're in a pretty good region globally. It was one of the global outperformers in terms of growth forecasts. I think Saudi Arabia, from the headline figures published yesterday, was the highest growth rate this year among those major economies. But globally, no, it doesn't look very good, and I don't think it's going to improve anytime soon, unfortunately.
Let's give Matt the last word, seeing as he was slagging the French about going on strikes. I'm not sure what's going on in the UK, but it seems every time you open the Guardian, it's another strike. Will OPEC supply cut deliver the floor? More than half this room thinks it will. I am, however, not on more than half this floor. Matt, looking at the announcement yesterday from the British UK governor, central bank governor, sort of basically saying he's not going to keep bailing out pension funds in the UK. I mean, how bad could this get, do you think?
It's nice to be in the Middle East and not have to worry about politics. And you look at
this is a little bit more than politics.
Well, it's just,
you're talking
it's just a bit
pensions. Nothing's more personal than pensions.
Yeah, I know. It's a bit farcical, isn't it? I mean, I'm not really sure when to read the papers and when there's a turnaround in policy. I just want to touch on the China.
Yes, please.
Just a quick. I think largely the oil market has priced in that China is going to make a comeback in some way. I agree with what Mehmet said, that there will not be an about face on zero COVID policy. That would just be an embarrassment for Xi and the Communist Party in general. But I think the market is wringing its hands and waiting for that moment when China do make the comeback and demand comes roaring back. I think that'll be some stage in Q1. That will mean that, a 60-day lead time on crude cargoes, because they're drawing down on crude inventories right now. I think they've drawn down on about 80 million barrels so far in the last 2 months. And that was a time when crude oil was trading at $10 a barrel during COVID time. So I think that that's probably worth between $15 and $20 a barrel boost on flat price come Q1. UK policy, look, I don't read the Daily Mail, Sean, so I'm not really sure what UK policy is. But look, they're going to.
But what my concern would be, and I know it's sort of maybe a bit too far outside your bailiwick, is given the possibility of contagion, I think is really starts to look like a potential financial crisis, where when you start talking about pensions collapsing, you're into a space that looks a little bit like what happened in the US with the housing crisis, and because you get into credit issues. Anyway, that's for another day. It looks like more weakness in the demand architecture of Europe, and so not surprised that the IMF is revising its growth forecast downwards, and that oil prices will continue to fall with that demand growth forecast downward. I'm not sure another 1 million barrels of fictional quota supply cuts will give you that $90 floor, Matt Stanley, but we'll see. The man who used to be a bear is now a bull. That's the crack. That's what happens when Arsenal win a few matches. You suddenly become a bull.
Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me.
Mehmet, lovely to have you back. And we'll have to have you back sooner. It's been too long. Daniel Richards from
Likewise,
thank you so much. Matt Stanley, as always, a pleasure to have you. Have a great day, everybody. Every morning, 10:30 UAE time. All the best.